What if one small act of kindness could change everything? 15 years old Elijah Carter never imagined that offering his bus seat to a pregnant stranger would set off a chain of events that would transform his struggling family's life. From the shadows of poverty to a future filled with hope, Elijah's journey proves that even the smallest gestures can create waves of change. But how did a crowded bus ride lead to a new beginning for his family, and the birth of his baby brother Levi in a moment that seemed nothing short of a miracle? You won't believe where this story leads. But before diving, let me know where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because we'll be bringing you more amazing gift tomorrow. Now, let's start this journey together. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the bustling streets of Brookfield, a working-class neighborhood just outside Chicago. 15 years old Elijah Carter adjusted his tattered backpack as he made his way home from school. The straps had long since frayed, and the bag hung awkwardly on his thin shoulders. His school uniform, faded from countless washes and patched at the elbows, spoke volumes about the struggles of his young life. The streets were alive with the chaotic symphony of the city, horns blaring, shopkeepers shouting, and the occasional laughter of children playing on the sidewalk. Elijah weaved through the crowd, careful to avoid puddles on the cracked pavement. His scuffed sneakers, barely holding together, were his only pair. Each step reminded him of the promise he had made to himself. One day, he would rise above this life, for himself and for his family. As he passed a bakery, the smell of fresh bread made his stomach rumble. He hadn't eaten since breakfast, a single slice of toast shared with his pregnant mother, Naomi. He had given up his lunch money earlier in the week, knowing it could help cover part of the grocery bill. Hunger was a constant companion, but Elijah had learned to push it aside. The electronics store on the corner caught his eye, with its bright televisions displaying perfect families sharing dinners in glowing, immaculate kitchens. Elijah paused, glancing at his reflection in the glass. A boy too small for his age stared back, his oversized backpack making him look even more fragile. Behind the glass, families laughed and shared moments he could only dream of. Elijah's apartment building loomed ahead, a dilapidated structure with peeling paint and rusted fire escapes. Apartment 3B was home, a cramped, two-room space that held the weight of every dream and every struggle his family endured. Elijah climbed the 4 flights of stairs, the elevator broken as always. He was used to the trek, though his legs ached from the long day. When he opened the door, the familiar silence greeted him. The space was dim, lit only by a single flickering bulb in the kitchen. A stack of unopened envelopes sat on the small dining table. Bills, overdue rent notices, medical expenses. Each envelope was like a stone added to the weight Elijah already carried on his young shoulders. On the fridge, a note in his mother's hurried handwriting caught his eye. Elijah, rice and beans in the fridge. Heat them up for dinner. Don't forget to mop the floor. I love you, Mom. Beside it, another note read, Son, please collect the clothes from the line before bed. I'll be home after midnight. Elijah set his bag down and stared at the notes. Naomi had always been a hard-working woman, juggling multiple responsibilities to provide for her family. She had become even stronger in the last 6 months after tragedy struck. Elijah's father, Samuel Carter, had been working as a construction worker in a city several hours away. His job was grueling and dangerous, often requiring him to work long shifts for little pay. Naomi had grown used to raising Elijah alone for most of the time, but they always looked forward to Samuel's visits when he brought home small savings and big smiles. 6 months ago, everything changed. While repairing scaffolding on a high-rise building, Samuel had fallen in a tragic accident. He hadn't survived, leaving Naomi to face the crushing weight of raising a teenager and preparing for a new baby, all on her own. Elijah opened a fridge, retrieving a container of cold rice and beans. It was the same meal they'd eaten for days. He ate straight from the container, saving himself the trouble of washing an extra dish. His eyes wandered to the photo on the wall, his father, standing tall and proud with an arm around Naomi, smiling on a sunny day. The edges of the photo were worn from years of being handled, but the memory it held was precious. As he ate, Elijah thought about how much his mother had endured. Since Samuel's death, Naomi had taken on extra shifts at the diner and cleaning jobs to make ends meet. But it was never enough. The doctor's warnings about her high-risk pregnancy only added to Elijah's worry. 3 months earlier, Naomi had fainted in the kitchen after coming home from a double shift. Elijah had been the one to catch her and call for help. That night, he made a promise to himself. He would protect his mother and the baby no matter what it took. After finishing his meal, Elijah set to work on his chores. He wiped the counters, swept the floor, and folded the laundry. Every task felt heavier, knowing his mother was out there working late into the night, her swollen belly making it harder to move with each passing day. By the time he sat down to study, the clock read 10:30 p.m. The kitchen table became his desk, a dim lamp casting a pool of yellowish light over his books. Elijah's teachers often marveled at his intelligence. He excelled in math, poring over equations with a focus that belied his young age. Numbers made sense to him in a way life didn't. They were predictable, solvable. But tonight, even math couldn't distract him. He thought about Naomi's struggles and the baby growing inside her. He thought about Samuel and the life they had lost together. Elijah clenched his fists, the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. The sound of keys jangling at the door snapped him out of his thoughts. Elijah ran to help as Naomi staggered in. Her face was pale, her uniform stained with grease from the diner, and her feet so swollen they barely fit in her shoes. "Elijah, why are you still awake?" she asked, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "I wanted to make sure you got home safe," he replied, helping her to the only upholstered chair in the apartment. He brought her a glass of water and the plate of rice and beans he had prepared earlier. She smiled faintly, though her hand trembled as she took the glass. "Elijah," she began, hesitating. Her other hand rested protectively on her belly. "The hospital sent another bill today." Elijah's heart sank. "How much?" Naomi pulled a crumpled envelope from her bag, revealing the number, $475 for the latest ultrasound and tests. She blinked back tears, her fingers unconsciously rubbing her swollen belly. "I'll figure it out," she whispered. Though the words lacked conviction, Elijah clenched his fists. He thought of the $32 he had saved in a cookie tin for a new pair of sneakers. It was nowhere near enough to make a difference, but he'd give it up in a heartbeat if it could ease her burden. "Mom, you need to rest," he said gently. "We'll figure it out together." Naomi smiled at him, her exhaustion evident. "You're too good to me, Elijah. Sometimes I forget you're just a boy." She drifted off to sleep on the couch, her head resting on a pillow Elijah placed under her. He covered her with a thin blanket and turned off the flickering lamp. As he stared at her peaceful face, he made a silent vow. He would find a way to help her. No matter what it took, he would protect his mother and the baby growing inside her. Outside, the city buzzed with life. But inside the small apartment, Elijah felt the crushing weight of responsibility. For now, all he could do was hold on to hope and prepare for another day. The school bell echoed through the hallways as Elijah Carter shoved his battered notebook into his worn-out backpack. His math teacher had praised him today for solving equations faster than anyone else in the class, but the fleeting pride he felt faded as quickly as it came. School was a brief escape, but the responsibilities waiting for him at home weighed heavy on his mind. As Elijah walked to the bus stop, he adjusted the straps of his frayed backpack, feeling the familiar ache in his shoulders. The afternoon sky had darkened, hinting at rain. His stomach grumbled, reminding him he hadn't eaten since morning. Yet Elijah pressed on, determined to make it home before the rain fell, to collect the laundry and prepare dinner for his mother when she returned from her grueling shifts. The 4:15 bus screeched to a stop, its brakes groaning under the weight of the packed vehicle. Elijah joined the line of tired workers, students, and shoppers boarding the bus. Inside, the air was stifling, a mix of body heat, sweat, and cheap cologne. People squeezed together, holding onto poles and handles as the bus lurched forward. Elijah spotted an empty seat near the back and hurried toward it, carefully balancing his heavy backpack. His legs burned from standing all day, and the thought of sitting, even for a short ride, was a small relief. He sank into the seat, leaning his head against the window as the city blurred past. At the next stop, the bus jerked to a halt, the doors creaking open. Passengers shuffled to make space, though there wasn't much to give. A woman stepped onto the bus, and Elijah's eyes immediately caught her. She was visibly pregnant, her swollen belly straining against a sleek gray dress. She clutched a briefcase in one hand and the bus railing in the other, her face tight with discomfort. Her heels wobbled slightly as the bus began to move again, throwing her off balance. Elijah's heart clenched. The sight of her struggling brought back images of his mother, Naomi, walking to the bus stop that very morning, one hand on her own belly, the other clutching her worn-out handbag. He remembered the doctor's warnings, his mother's fainting spells, and the exhaustion etched on her face. For a brief moment, Elijah hesitated. He was so tired, his back screaming from the weight of his backpack, his stomach hollow from hunger. But the image of his mother flashed in his mind again, and the decision became clear. "Ma'am," Elijah said, his voice soft but steady as he stood. "You can take my seat." The woman looked at him, startled by the offer. Her tired eyes scanned him quickly, his too small uniform, his scuffed sneakers, and the oversized backpack now slung over one shoulder. For a moment, she seemed unsure if he was serious. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Elijah nodded firmly. "Yes, ma'am. You need it more than I do." Grateful, the woman eased herself into the seat, her briefcase resting on her lap. She let out a quiet sigh of relief, one hand instinctively resting on her belly. "Thank you," she said, her voice warm with appreciation. "What's your name?" Elijah hesitated. His mother had always told him not to share personal information with strangers. But there was something about the woman's kind smile that reminded him of Naomi. "Elijah," he replied finally, gripping the overhead railing for balance as the bus swayed. "I'm Serena," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "You're very polite, Elijah. Not many young people would do what you just did." Elijah shrugged, his gaze dropping to his shoes. "It's nothing. My mom's pregnant too, and I know how hard it is for her to stand on buses." Serena's expression shifted, a mixture of surprise and empathy. "Your mother's pregnant?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. 7 months? Elijah said, his voice quieter now. "She works 2 jobs, even though the doctor says she shouldn't. But we don't have a choice." Serena's grip tightened on her briefcase as she processed his words. "That's a lot for her to handle," she said softly. "And for you too." Elijah didn't respond. He wasn't used to talking about his family's struggles, especially to someone he'd just met. But something about Serena's genuine concern felt different. "Do you live far from here?" Serena asked, her tone careful, as if she didn't want to pry too much. "Just a few stops away," Elijah replied. "We live in an old apartment building. It's not much, but it's home." Serena nodded thoughtfully, glancing at the oversized backpack Elijah carried. "And you're in school? What grade are you in?" "8th, he said. "I like math. Numbers make sense, even when nothing else does." He thought of Naomi working long hours, pushing through her pain to provide for him and the baby. "She works really hard," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. "I just want to help her, make things a little easier." The bus hit another pothole, jolting everyone inside. Serena adjusted her briefcase, her brows furrowing as she watched Elijah shift his weight to keep his balance. "Elijah," she said after a moment, her tone gentle but firm, "you're an incredible young man. Not just for giving up your seat, but for how much you care about your mother." Elijah didn't know what to say. He looked out the window, his reflection staring back at him. But for once, he didn't feel so small. As the bus approached his stop, Elijah prepared to get off. Serena reached into her briefcase, pulling out a pen and a card. "Elijah," she said, holding out the card, "if there's ever anything you or your family need, please don't hesitate to call me." "I mean it." Elijah hesitated, unsure if he should take it. But something in Serena's eyes, kind, sincere, and determined, made him trust her. He took the card, his fingers brushing against hers briefly. "Thank you," he said quietly, stuffing the card into his pocket as he stepped off the bus. The rain had started to fall, soft droplets turning into a steady drizzle. Elijah tightened his grip on his backpack and began the short walk home. His heart felt heavier than usual, but not from the weight of his books. He couldn't stop thinking about Serena's words and the kindness in her voice. As he climbed the stairs to his apartment, the card in his pocket seemed to burn against his leg. For the first time in a long time, Elijah wondered if something good might come from the small gesture he had made today. The following morning, the familiar sounds of Brookfield stirred Elijah Carter from sleep. The distant hum of traffic, the murmur of neighbors in the hallway, and the occasional barking of a stray dog. He stretched, his body still sore from the previous day. The faint light filtering through the thin curtains reminded him that another long day lay ahead. Elijah pulled on his tattered sneakers and began his usual routine. First, he cleared the dishes from last night, then tidied the living room, ensuring everything looked presentable before his mother returned from her early cleaning shift. As he worked, his mind kept drifting back to the woman from the bus, Serena. Her words had stayed with him, her kind eyes lingering in his thoughts. By late afternoon, Elijah was deep into his schoolwork when the sound of excited voices from the street below broke his concentration. Curious, he moved to the window, pulling back the worn curtain to peer outside. His heart skipped a beat. Parked at the curb was a sleek, black car, its polished exterior gleaming against the backdrop of their dilapidated neighborhood. Children from nearby apartments had gathered around, pointing and whispering. Elijah's pulse quickened. Cars like that didn't belong here. Moments later, the driver's side door opened, and a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He adjusted his tie with practiced ease before circling the car to open the passenger door. Elijah recognized her immediately. Serena, the pregnant woman from the bus. She stepped out gracefully, her hand resting on her belly as she glanced up at the apartment building. Elijah froze. His mind raced with questions. Why was she here? How did she know where he lived? Panic bubbled in his chest as he remembered the card she had given him. He hadn't mentioned it to his mother, worried it might cause her unnecessary concern. A knock at the door shattered his thoughts. Elijah's legs felt like lead as he moved toward it, hesitating before cracking it open just enough to see who was outside. Elijah, Serena said warmly, her smile disarming. Standing beside her was the man in the suit, who looked just as polished up close. May we come in? She asked gently, her tone reassuring. Elijah hesitated. His instincts told him to refuse, but something in her expression, genuine and kind, made him pause. Slowly, he opened the door wider, stepping aside to let them in. The couple entered, their presence filling the small apartment. Serena sat carefully on the worn sofa, while the man introduced himself. I'm Marcus, he said, extending a hand. Elijah hesitated before shaking it, his grip firm despite his nervousness. Serena's husband. Serena looked around the modest space, her eyes lingering on the stack of bills on the table and the frayed edges of the curtains. Elijah, I know this might seem strange, she began, her voice soft. But yesterday, when we met on the bus, something about our conversation stayed with me. Elijah stood near the doorway, his arms crossed defensively. Why are you here? He asked, his voice cautious. Marcus stepped forward, his tone calm but earnest. We're here because of you, Elijah. Because of what you did. What I did? Elijah repeated, confused. Serena nodded, her eyes glistening. You didn't just give up your seat, Elijah. You shared your story. You told me about your mother, about her strength and the sacrifices she's making. It moved me in a way I can't explain. Elijah shifted uncomfortably, unsure how to respond. We've been fortunate in life, Marcus continued, his voice steady. And when Serena told me about you and your mother, we knew we had to do something. Do something? Elijah echoed, his brow furrowing. Serena reached for her briefcase, which Marcus had carried in. She opened it, pulling out a folder and placing it on the table. We own a property management company here in the city, she explained. We have an opening for an administrative position, office work, Monday through Friday with full health benefits. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. The salary, Marcus added, flipping open the folder to reveal a printed contract. is 3 times what your mother earns now. It also includes insurance that covers prenatal care, childbirth, and postnatal support. Elijah stared at the papers, his thoughts swirling. It sounded too good to be true. Why? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Why would you do this for us? Serena leaned forward, her hands resting on her belly. Because kindness matters, Elijah. You showed me kindness when you didn't have to. You reminded me of what it means to truly care for others. This is our way of giving that back. Elijah felt his chest tighten. Part of him wanted to believe them, to accept this lifeline without hesitation. But another part, the part hardened by years of disappointment and struggle, was skeptical. My mom, he began, his voice trembling slightly. She's not home right now. I can't make this decision for her. Of course, Marcus said, his tone understanding. We'll wait. They stayed for nearly an hour, making small talk with Elijah as he kept glancing nervously at the clock. Finally, the sound of keys at the door signaled Naomi's arrival. The door opened and Naomi stepped inside, her expression turning to surprise as she saw the couple in her living room. Elijah, what's going on? She asked, setting down her worn bag. Mom, Elijah said quickly, moving to her side. These are Marcus and Serena. They wanted to talk to you. Serena stood, her movements careful. Mrs. Carter, I'm Serena Wilson, and this is my husband, Marcus. We met Elijah yesterday, and he told me about you, about everything you've been doing for your family. Naomi's face flushed, and she glanced at Elijah, who looked down at his shoes. I'm not sure what he told you, she said cautiously. Serena approached her, her voice filled with warmth. He told me about your strength, about how you've been working tirelessly, even while pregnant, to provide for him and your baby. It's extraordinary, Mrs. Carter. Naomi's shoulders slumped slightly, the weight of her exhaustion evident. We do what we have to, she said simply. That's exactly why we're here, Marcus said, stepping forward. He gestured to the folder on the table. We want to offer you a job, one that pays well, with full benefits and hours that allow you to rest and care for yourself and your family. Naomi blinked, her eyes darting between Marcus, Serena, and the papers. I don't understand, she said softly. Why would you do this for me? Serena smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. Because your son's kindness reminded me of the goodness in people. This is our way of paying it forward. Naomi's hands trembled as she picked up the contract. Her eyes scanned the details, her expression a mix of disbelief and hope. She looked at Elijah, who gave her a small nod, his own eyes filled with emotion. Mrs. Carter, Marcus said gently, this is real, and it's yours if you want it. Naomi took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. She reached out, pulling Elijah into a tight embrace before turning to the Wilsons. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice breaking. You already have, Serena replied, her smile radiant, by raising such a remarkable son. For the first time in years, Naomi felt the heavy weight on her shoulders begin to lift. Naomi Carter sat at the small kitchen table, her hands trembling as she held the contract Marcus Wilson had handed her. The words on the page blurred as tears filled her eyes. She glanced up at Elijah, who stood by her side, his expression a mixture of hope and nervousness. The Wilsons sat across from her, their demeanor calm but encouraging. Marcus, with his polished suit and steady gaze, exuded an air of quiet confidence. Serena, despite her visibly pregnant state, radiated warmth and sincerity. I still don't understand why, Naomi said softly, her voice breaking. Why would you offer this to someone like me? Because we can, Marcus replied simply, his tone firm but kind. And because we believe in helping people who deserve it. Serena leaned forward, her hands resting gently on the edge of the table. Naomi, you've been carrying so much on your shoulders. You've given everything to your son and your unborn child. This isn't just about offering you a job. It's about giving you a chance to breathe, to focus on your health, and to prepare for your future as a family. Naomi swallowed hard, the words hitting her like a wave. I don't have experience with office work, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. That's not a problem, Marcus said, gesturing to the contract. We'll provide all the training you need. What we value most is your work ethic and determination, qualities Elijah spoke so highly of. Naomi's gaze shifted to Elijah, who gave her a small, reassuring nod. Mom, he said quietly, you've always told me that sometimes we just have to trust in good things when they come our way. Maybe this is one of those times. Her eyes filled with fresh tears as she looked at her son. He was only 15, yet he carried himself with the maturity of someone much older. She could see the hope in his eyes, the belief that this opportunity could change everything for them. I don't know if I can do this, she said, her voice trembling. You can, Serena said firmly, her voice filled with conviction. You've already proven how strong you are, Naomi. This job isn't just for you. It's for Elijah and the baby too. Naomi wiped her tears, taking a deep breath. She knew they were right. This wasn't just about her pride or fear of failure. It was about giving her children a better life, one free from the relentless grind of double shifts and mounting bills. Okay, she said finally, her voice steadying. I'll do it. Marcus smiled, a look of satisfaction crossing his face. You won't regret this decision, Naomi. Serena reached across the table, placing her hand gently over Naomi's. This is the beginning of something new for your family. Naomi glanced down at the contract once more, her fingers brushing over the details. Health insurance, a Monday to Friday schedule, and a salary that seemed almost unimaginable. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something she had long buried: hope. The following Monday, the morning sun streamed through the thin curtains of the Carter apartment, casting a warm glow over the small kitchen. Elijah Carter stood at the counter, carefully slicing bread for breakfast. His mother, Naomi, sat at the table, nervously buttoning her new blouse. The soft fabric was a stark contrast to the stiff uniform she had worn for years, and the modest but elegant outfit made her look like someone who was finally stepping into a better chapter of life. Does this look okay? Naomi asked, smoothing the front of the blouse. Elijah turned, giving her a thumbs up and a wide smile. You look great, Mom. Professional. Naomi chuckled softly, though her hands still trembled as she adjusted the collar. It's been a long time since I've worn something that wasn't covered in grease or cleaning supplies. You're going to do amazing, Elijah said with conviction. This is just the start. He placed 2 plates on the table, bread with butter and a small bowl of fruit Serena Wilson had sent over the day before. It was a simple meal, but to them, it felt like a feast. Naomi took a bite, savoring the taste. I can't remember the last time I sat down for breakfast, she admitted. Well, get used to it, Elijah teased, pouring her a glass of milk. You're on a normal schedule now. No more rushing to catch buses before sunrise. Naomi reached out to ruffle Elijah's hair, her heart swelling with pride. You've grown up so fast, she said, her voice tinged with emotion. I don't know how I would have made it through these last few years without you. Elijah grinned, but quickly brushed off the compliment. It's what families do, Mom. We've got each other's backs. By the time Naomi left for her first day at work, the nervousness in her step had been replaced by cautious optimism. Elijah watched from the window as she boarded the bus, her head held high. It was a sight that filled him with hope, a glimpse of the brighter future they had both been working toward. Naomi stepped off the bus outside the sleek office building where the Wilsons Company was headquartered. The towering structure was a stark contrast to the diner and cleaning job she was accustomed to. Her heart raced as she approached the glass doors, clutching the second-hand handbag Serena had lent her. Inside, the receptionist greeted her with a warm smile, directing her to the orientation room. Naomi's nerves eased slightly as she entered, finding a small group of new hires seated around a polished conference table. A woman named Carla, the training supervisor, introduced herself and began the orientation. Carla was patient and approachable, taking the time to explain each aspect of the job. Naomi listened intently, scribbling notes in the notebook Elijah had given her. During the break, Carla approached Naomi with a smile. First days can be overwhelming, can't they? She said kindly. Naomi nodded. It's all so new to me, but I'm eager to learn. Carla's smile widened. That's the right attitude. You'll do great here. As the day progressed, Naomi's confidence grew. She practiced using the office computer, learned how to manage schedules, and familiarized herself with filing systems. By the end of the day, she felt a glimmer of pride. With his mother gone for the day, Elijah turned his attention to their apartment. The small space, once cluttered and filled with reminders of their struggles, now felt like a blank canvas for new beginnings. He began by organizing the pile of baby clothes Serena had given them, folding each piece neatly and placing them in the chest of drawers Mr. Jose from downstairs had helped them build. The room they shared was small, but Elijah had carved out a cozy corner for his soon-to-arrive baby brother. A crib painted in soft blue, a set of stuffed animals, and a mobile that played a gentle lullaby hung above. As Elijah worked, he couldn't help but smile. For the first time, it felt like they were preparing, not just surviving. When Naomi returned home that evening, the change in her demeanor was unmistakable. She walked through the door with a lightness in her step and an energy Elijah hadn't seen in years. "Elijah, you won't believe it," she said, her voice bursting with excitement as she set her bag down. "What happened?" he asked, eager to hear. "I have my own desk," Naomi said, her hands gesturing animatedly, "with a computer and everything. And my supervisor, Carla, she's so patient. She walked me through everything step by step." "That's amazing, Mom," Elijah said, his smile widening. Naomi sat on the sofa, her eyes sparkling. "And the team is so kind. There's even a lounge where I can rest if I need to, and the office has a break room with fresh coffee." Elijah laughed, sitting beside her. "You deserve all of it, Mom. Every bit." Naomi placed a hand on her belly, her smile softening. "It's not just for me," she said. "It's for you and the baby. This job changes everything." Over the following weeks, the positive changes in their lives became more and more apparent. Naomi's health improved steadily, thanks to regular checkups and less physically demanding work. The stress that had once clouded her every moment began to lift, replaced by a sense of security she hadn't felt in years. Elijah noticed the little things first. The way his mother hummed while preparing dinner, the color returning to her cheeks, and the way she no longer hesitated to laugh. At school, Elijah's teachers remarked on his newfound focus. He threw himself into his studies, knowing that each equation he solved and every assignment he completed was a step toward the brighter future his mother had worked so hard to provide. One Saturday morning, Naomi and Elijah sat together at the kitchen table, poring over a list of baby names. "What about Caleb?" Naomi suggested, tapping her pen against the page. Elijah scrunched his nose playfully. "Too common." "What about Dominic?" Naomi laughed, shaking her head. "We're not naming him after a movie character, Elijah." The two continued their back and forth, the conversation light and full of joy. For once, their worries didn't dominate the room. Later that day, they ventured to a nearby baby store. It was a small shop, tucked between a bakery and a thrift store, but to them, it felt like a treasure trove. Naomi's eyes lit up as she picked out a soft blue blanket, running her fingers over the fabric. "This will be perfect for him," she said, her voice full of warmth. Elijah browsed the shelves, carefully selecting a stuffed giraffe. "He'll love this," he said confidently. As they walked home with their purchases, the weight of their bags felt lighter than the happiness they carried. One evening, as they worked together to assemble the crib, Naomi paused to look at her son. "Elijah," she said softly, her voice tinged with emotion, "I hope you know how much you've done for me. For us. None of this would have been possible without you." Elijah looked up, his hands pausing mid-turn of the screwdriver. "Mom, you've always done everything for me. It's my turn to help." Naomi reached out, placing a hand on his cheek. "You're not just helping Elijah. You're shaping the future. For me, for your brother, for all of us." As they finished the crib, the soft sound of the mobile playing a lullaby filled the room. The sight of the neatly arranged baby corner brought tears to Naomi's eyes. "We're ready for him," she whispered. "For this new chapter." Elijah nodded, his heart swelling with pride. They had faced so many challenges, but now, as they stood in the glow of their small but happy home, it was clear that the hardest days were behind them. A new beginning had finally arrived. The hum of conversation filled the hallway of the Carter apartment building one evening, louder than usual. Elijah peered out the window to see Mrs. Jenkins, their elderly neighbor from 2 floors down, chatting animatedly with Mr. Jose, the retired carpenter who had helped them build the baby's chest of drawers. They seemed to be discussing the Carter family, a sight that made Elijah's cheeks flush with embarrassment but also a touch of pride. Word had spread through the building about Naomi's new job and the upcoming arrival of her baby. What began as small gestures of kindness soon turned into a full-fledged community effort to support the family. One morning, as Naomi returned from work, balancing a box of supplies provided by her office, she was greeted by Mrs. Jenkins at her door. "Naomi, I knitted this for the baby," Mrs. Jenkins said, holding up a soft yellow blanket adorned with tiny white stars. "I didn't know if you'd need one, but I figured it wouldn't hurt." Naomi's eyes welled with tears as she accepted the gift. "It's beautiful. Thank you so much, Mrs. Jenkins. You didn't have to go through all this trouble." "Nonsense," Mrs. Jenkins replied with a wave of her hand. "A new baby is a blessing. We should all celebrate it." Later that day, Elijah was helping Naomi sort through the growing pile of baby supplies when a knock came at the door. It was Mr. Jose, holding a wooden mobile decorated with tiny hand-carved animals. "I thought this might look nice above the crib," he said, handing it to Elijah. "It's nothing fancy, but I wanted to contribute." Elijah turned the mobile in his hands, marveling at the detail in each tiny creature. "It's perfect, Mr. Jose. Thank you." "It's the least I can do," the older man replied. "Your mother has always been kind to everyone here. It's time we gave back." At work, Naomi found herself on the receiving end of similar acts of generosity. Her coworker Carla had become a close friend, often stopping by Naomi's desk to check on her. One afternoon, Carla appeared with a small box wrapped in pink paper. "What's this?" Naomi asked, her curiosity piqued. "Just a little something for the baby," Carla said with a grin. Naomi unwrapped the box to reveal a set of soft baby clothes in various pastel shades. Each piece was carefully folded, the tags still attached. "These are beautiful," Naomi said, running her fingers over the delicate fabric. "I figured you could use a few new things," Carla said. "You deserve it." Naomi was overwhelmed by the kindness she encountered daily. She had always been used to standing on her own, but now she was beginning to realize the strength in letting others help. The most unexpected act of support came from Serena Wilson. One evening, she called Naomi with a proposal. "Naomi, I've been thinking," Serena began. "I'm planning a baby shower for next month, and it struck me, why don't we make it a shared celebration? A double baby shower for both of us." Naomi hesitated, unsure how to respond. "Serena, I don't want to impose on your plans." "You're not imposing," Serena insisted. "If anything, you're making the celebration even more special. After all, our friendship started because of these babies. What better way to honor that?" Naomi felt her heart swell with gratitude. "If you're sure, I'd love that." "Good," Serena said, her voice bright. "Leave the planning to me. We'll make it a day to remember." In the weeks leading up to the shower, the apartment building buzzed with excitement. Mrs. Jenkins offered to bake cookies, and Mr. Jose volunteered to help set up decorations. Even Elijah's classmates got involved, contributing small gifts and handmade cards. On the day of the shower, the community room on the ground floor of the apartment building was transformed. Strings of blue and yellow balloons hung from the ceiling, and a long table was piled high, with gifts wrapped in bright paper. Naomi arrived to find Serena already there, greeting guests with a radiant smile. The two women embraced, their shared journey bringing them closer than ever. The event was filled with laughter and heartfelt moments. Carla led a game where guests guessed the baby's due dates, and Mr. Jose delivered a short speech about the importance of community. Naomi couldn't stop smiling. For the first time in years, she felt surrounded by warmth and support, a stark contrast to the loneliness she had grown so used to. As the party wound down, Serena and Naomi sat together on a pair of cushioned chairs at the front of the room. Beside them, the table overflowed with gifts, everything from diapers and bottles to handmade blankets and toys. You know, Serena said, resting a hand on her belly. I never imagined a chance meeting on a bus would lead to all this. Naomi laughed softly, her own hand mirroring Serena's. Me neither, but I'm glad it did. The two women shared a look, their bond forged through mutual kindness and shared struggles. Back in the apartment later that evening, Naomi and Elijah unpacked the gifts. One by one, they placed each item in its designated spot, the baby's corner of the room taking on a life of its own. Look at this, Naomi said, holding up a framed picture of an ultrasound that Serena had given her. She even had this made for us. Elijah grinned as he arranged the stuffed animals on a shelf. Serena's pretty great. So is everyone else. I can't believe how much they've done for us. Naomi placed the frame on the dresser, her eyes misty with emotion. It's more than I ever could have hoped for. She turned to Elijah, pulling him into a hug. And it all started with you, she whispered. Your kindness brought all of this into our lives. Elijah hugged her back tightly, feeling the truth in her words. It had been a long journey, but the support of their community had shown them that they were never truly alone. As they stood together in their small but cozy apartment, surrounded by the fruits of their neighbors' generosity, one thing was clear. Their lives were no longer defined by struggle, but by hope and the strength of the people who had rallied around them. The night was unusually quiet in Brookfield. The usual hum of distant traffic and faint chatter from neighbors seemed to have taken a pause, as if the world itself held its breath. Inside the Carter apartment, Elijah sat at the kitchen table, finishing the last problem in his math workbook. Naomi reclined on the couch nearby, her hand resting gently on her swollen belly. Are you feeling okay, Mom? Elijah asked, glancing up from his book. Naomi gave him a reassuring smile. Just a little tired, sweetheart. This boy has been kicking up a storm tonight. Elijah smiled and turned back to his homework, but he kept stealing glances at his mother. Over the past few weeks, she had seemed lighter, her health visibly improving with her new job and the support of their community. Yet, as her due date approached, Elijah couldn't help but worry. It was just past midnight when Naomi suddenly gasped, clutching her belly. The sound made Elijah's head snap up. Mom, he asked, rushing to her side. Her face was tense, beads of sweat forming on her brow. Elijah, I think it's time, she said, her voice strained but steady. Elijah's heart raced. He grabbed the overnight bag they had packed weeks earlier and reached for his phone. His hands trembled as he dialed Serena Wilson, who had insisted he call her when the time came. 15 minutes later, Serena and her husband Marcus arrived in their sleek black car. Naomi, now breathing heavily through contractions, was helped into the back seat by Marcus, while Serena stayed by her side, offering comforting words. Elijah climbed into the front, clutching the bag tightly on his lap. He glanced back at his mother, his stomach twisting with nerves. You're doing great, Mom, he said, his voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside him. Naomi managed a small smile. You're my rock, Elijah. The drive to the hospital felt both endless and too fast. When they arrived, Naomi was whisked away by a team of nurses while Serena stayed with Elijah, helping him navigate the unfamiliar environment of the private hospital. The waiting room was quiet, save for the occasional soft murmur of nurses passing by. Serena sat beside Elijah, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. She's in good hands, Serena reassured him. This hospital is one of the best, and the doctors here know exactly what to do. Elijah nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the double doors his mother had disappeared through. He clenched and unclenched his fists, trying to keep his nerves in check. Time moved agonizingly slowly. Elijah alternated between pacing the room and sitting with Serena, his mind racing with every possible scenario. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, a nurse entered the waiting room. Her face lit with a warm smile. Elijah Carter, she called. Elijah shot to his feet, his heart pounding. Your mother and baby brother are doing wonderfully, the nurse said. Would you like to meet him? Elijah's breath caught in his throat. He nodded, unable to speak, and followed the nurse down the hall. The room was softly lit, a stark contrast to the harsh lights Elijah had always associated with hospitals. Naomi lay in the bed, her face glowing with exhaustion and joy. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blue blanket. "Come here, Elijah," Naomi said, her voice soft but steady. Elijah approached slowly, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of his baby brother for the first time. Naomi shifted slightly, allowing him to see the baby's face. "Elijah, meet Levi," she said. The baby's eyes fluttered open briefly, and Elijah felt his breath hitch. Levi's tiny features, his button nose, soft tufts of dark hair, seemed almost surreal. "He's perfect," Elijah whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Naomi smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "He already has the best big brother to look up to." Elijah reached out, his hands trembling slightly, as Naomi gently placed Levi in his arms. The baby's weight was light but grounding, as if anchoring Elijah to the moment. Levi stirred, letting out a soft coo, and Elijah felt his chest swell with a sense of pride and protectiveness he had never experienced before. As Elijah held Levi, memories of the past few months flooded his mind. The crowded bus ride where he had offered his seat to Serena. The Wilsons' visit to their apartment. The community rallying around their family with gifts and support. It all started with a single act of kindness. He looked up at Naomi, who was watching him with a gentle smile. "Mom, I think this is what they mean when they say small things can make a big difference." Naomi reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "It's true, Elijah, and you've proven that over and over again." Over the next few days, the Carter family was showered with visits and well wishes. Serena and Marcus stopped by with flowers and a teddy bear almost as big as Elijah. Carla from Naomi's office sent over a basket of homemade meals to help them settle in. Even Mrs. Jenkins, who rarely left her apartment, made her way to the hospital with a hand-knitted hat for Levi. Back at home, the apartment seemed to glow with newfound warmth. The baby's corner was now the centerpiece of their space, filled with everything Levi could possibly need. One evening, as Elijah rocked Levi gently in his arms, he glanced at the picture frame on the dresser, a photo of him and Naomi smiling at the baby shower, surrounded by their community. "Levi," Elijah whispered, "you don't know it yet, but you've been born into a world that's full of kindness. And I'm going to make sure you grow up knowing how important that is." Naomi, resting on the couch, overheard his words and felt a swell of pride. "You're going to be an amazing big brother, Elijah," she said. Elijah looked at her, his eyes filled with determination. "It's all because of you, Mom. You've shown me what it means to care for others." Naomi reached out, taking his free hand in hers. Together, they looked at Levi, their hearts full of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this moment. The family's future, once uncertain, now felt like a promise, one built on love, resilience, and the power of kindness. Weeks after Levi's birth, life in the Carter household had transformed in ways Elijah could never have imagined. Their small apartment, once a place marked by quiet struggle, now echoed with laughter, the soft hum of lullabies, and the gentle coos of a newborn. Naomi seemed like a different person. The weight that had once hunched her shoulders had lifted, replaced by a calm confidence that came from knowing her family was secure. She often hummed as she moved around the apartment, whether she was preparing dinner or gently rocking Levi to sleep. Elijah noticed these changes most in the little moments, when Naomi smiled without hesitation, when she joined him at the kitchen table to help with his schoolwork, and when she paused during busy afternoons to simply hold Levi and marvel at him. Their community, too, had shifted. Neighbors stopped by more often, bringing small gifts or simply checking in. It was as if Levi's arrival had breathed new life into the building. Mrs. Jenkins would leave hand-knitted items at their door with notes like, "For little Levi, may he always know how loved he is." Mr. Jose, who had become a kind of honorary grandfather, often popped in to fix minor issues in the apartment or build small toys for the baby. But it wasn't just about the tangible gifts or the time people gave. It was about the sense of belonging that had grown among them all. Their neighborhood, once fragmented and distant, now felt like a true community. One crisp autumn morning, Elijah boarded the bus to school, his backpack slightly lighter now that his mother insisted on packing him a full lunch every day. The air inside the bus was warm, filled with the quiet murmur of passengers. Elijah found a seat near the middle and settled in, watching the familiar streets of Brookfield pass by. At the next stop, the bus jolted to a halt, and the doors creaked open. An elderly woman stepped on, her hands trembling as she struggled to lift two large grocery bags. She paused near the driver, her eyes scanning the crowded bus for an empty seat. Without hesitation, Elijah stood and gestured to his seat. "Ma'am, you can sit here," he said, his voice calm and steady. The woman's face lit up with gratitude. "Oh, thank you, young man," she said, carefully lowering herself into the seat. As Elijah stood in the aisle, holding onto the railing, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The moment reminded him of the day he had first met Serena Wilson. Back then, he hadn't known how much a small gesture could ripple outward, changing not just his life, but the lives of those around him. When Elijah got off the bus and walked toward school, his mind wandered back to everything that had happened since that fateful day. Offering his seat to Serena had felt like such a small thing, just a way to ease the discomfort of a stranger. But it had set off a chain reaction of kindness that had forever altered the course of his family's life. He thought about Naomi's journey, from the exhausted woman working double shifts to the confident mother now thriving in her job. He thought about Levi, whose arrival had brought so much joy and renewed purpose to their lives. And he thought about their community, a patchwork of individuals who had come together to support one another in ways he'd never expected. What struck Elijah most was how these changes weren't confined to their small apartment. They had spread outward, touching the lives of others. Serena and Marcus often spoke about how meeting Elijah and Naomi had inspired them to start a foundation focused on supporting families in need. Naomi's co-workers, seeing her determination and growth, had begun organizing workplace initiatives to help other single parents. That evening, Elijah sat at the kitchen table, scribbling ideas for a school essay. The topic was a moment that changed everything, and he didn't have to think twice about what he would write. As he worked, Naomi walked in, holding Levi against her chest. She sat down across from him, a warm smile on her face. "What's the essay about?" she asked, adjusting Levi's blanket. "A moment that changed everything," Elijah replied, his pen pausing on the page. "I'm writing about the bus ride where I met Serena." Naomi's eyes softened. "That was the start of something incredible, wasn't it?" Elijah nodded. "It made me realize how powerful small acts of kindness can be. I didn't know it at the time, but offering my seat wasn't just about helping her. It was about setting something bigger in motion." Naomi reached out, placing a hand over Elijah's. "That's because kindness has a way of multiplying," she said. "What you did inspired her, and what she did changed our lives. And now, who knows how many other lives will be touched because of it." Elijah thought about her words as he continued writing. His essay became more than just a recounting of events. It became a reflection on the deeper lessons he had learned. As the weeks passed, the Carters continued to adjust to their new normal. Naomi's maternity leave allowed her to bond deeply with Levi, while Elijah thrived in school, his confidence growing with each passing day. One evening, as the family sat together in their small living room, Elijah shared a thought that had been on his mind. "Do you think Levi will grow up knowing how much everyone cared for him?" he asked. Looking at Naomi, Naomi smiled, cradling Levi closer. "He'll know, Elijah, because we'll tell him, and more importantly, we'll show him." Elijah nodded, feeling a sense of responsibility toward his baby brother. He wanted Levi to grow up understanding the power of community and the importance of helping others. The ripple effect of Elijah's kindness didn't stop with his family. It extended to their neighbors, to Serena and Marcus, and to everyone who had been touched by their story. It became a testament to the idea that even the smallest actions can have profound impacts through the ups and downs of their journey. The Carters had learned that kindness wasn't just about grand gestures. It was about the everyday choices to care, to give, and to believe in something greater than oneself. As Elijah prepared for bed that night, he stood by Levi's crib, watching his baby brother sleep. The soft glow of the mobile cast gentle shadows on the wall, and the sound of Naomi humming in the kitchen filled the air. Elijah placed a hand on the edge of the crib, a quiet promise forming in his heart. He would carry this lesson forward, just as his mother had taught him, and ensure that Levi grew up in a world where kindness continued to ripple outward, creating waves of change. The Carter story wasn't just about survival. It was about transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of love. And it all began with one simple, selfless act. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heartfelt story. We wish you a joyful and warm Christmas filled with love and happiness. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to join us for more inspiring stories to come. See you in the next one.